Hello, my darling. It's Rose. The morning after my husband died, the house was too quiet. Not peaceful, not calm, but the kind of quiet that feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I made coffee, I didn't drink, sat in the kitchen in the same robe I'd worn since Tuesday, and stared at the hallway. At that one door I had never been allowed to open. For 52 years, my husband locked his office every single night. 52 years. Rain, snow, birthdays, Christmas. I'd ask in those early days. He was a physician, a brilliant one by all accounts. And he'd smile, touch my hand, and say it was patient confidentiality. You wouldn't understand, Rose. He'd whisper, like he was protecting me. Best not to look. And for too long, I believed him. But now, with his funeral behind me and my grief still folded up somewhere in the coat closet, I found myself standing before that door. My hand hesitated at the knob. I half expected his voice to come from the other side. Warm, paternal, firm. Not for you, Rosie. But it didn't. He wasn't here anymore. So I turned and walked to the kitchen, pulled out the yellow pages like it was 1993, found a locksmith, a young man named Nathan. Polite, with kind eyes. He didn't ask why I wanted to unlock a door inside my own house. He just looked at the brass fixture, nodded, and said, "Hasn't been changed in a long time." That made two of us, I thought. It took him 12 minutes. When the lock clicked open, the sound was sharp, too loud in the quiet, like a cork popping on a shaken bottle. The door was still warm from his tools. My hand hovered over the knob, and then I turned it. The door swung open with the slowest creak. It smelled of dust and old air, not musty, just still, as if the room hadn't been touched by time. Inside, it was not what I expected. No chaos, no mess, not even much furniture. Just a desk, a high-backed leather chair, and walls. Walls lined with black binders. Floor to ceiling, perfect rows, perfectly labeled. Some binders were numbered, others named. One wall was entirely dedicated to red folders, each marked with my name. Rosemary, 1973. Rosemary, 1986. Rosemary Incident Log, 1992. On one shelf, a little brass plaque. Subject EG1. Subject. I took one binder down. My hands shook. Inside, typed pages, my schedule, my moods, my medication, notes in the margins. Exhibited disorientation after dinner. Denied knowledge of prior discussion. Suggest increased dosage if agitation returns. Each page was a day of my life. Observed, documented, controlled. I dropped the binder. It landed with a thud that felt final. He hadn't just locked me out of a room. He'd built a lab, a case study, a shrine to control. And I, foolish, trusting, loyal, had lived under surveillance for half a century. And I hadn't even seen the worst yet, because sitting on the desk under a paperweight shaped like an apple was an envelope. My name in his careful handwriting. Rosemary, in the event of my death. I picked it up, opened it. Inside was one sentence, typed, not handwritten. You will be tempted to read more than you should. I advise against it. No apology, no explanation, just a warning, but it was already too late. I had opened the door, and I would read every single page. The second morning, I didn't cry. I thought I might. You hear about these moments? Wives opening letters from the dead, weeping into silk handkerchiefs, calling daughters for comfort. But there were no tears. Just the sound of my old slippers on the hardwood floor and the electric hum of the fridge, steady, indifferent. I made tea, poured it, didn't drink it. Instead, I walked back down that hallway with a folder clutched against my chest like it might fly away. I hadn't been able to sleep, not after what I'd seen. That binder, the one marked Incident Log 1992, it detailed the day I crashed the car on the way back from the pharmacy. I remember crying, apologizing, blaming the rain, the blur of headlights. He told me it was my nerves, my anxiety, that I wasn't meant to drive anymore. What I didn't remember until I read it in his notes was what came before the crash. He'd changed my medication, doubled the dose, and noted in the margin, cognitive sluggishness observed, trial complete. Recommend return to prior dosage. Trial. as if I was part of some damn experiment. I stepped into that room again, his office, his sanctum, his secret, and turned on the green banker's lamp. The light was too clean, too calm for what I was about to do. I began to read, binder after binder. He had logged everything, my daily habits, my phone calls. There were even transcripts, actual typed transcripts, of conversations I'd had with my sister, my bridge group, the gardener. Tone, distressed. He'd written next to a phone call with Helen after my hysterectomy. Subject displays poor memory retention of medical conversations. Consider reinforcing nightly sedative. It wasn't just control, it was dissection. Each year had a new label. Efficacy trials, compliance reports, behavioral adjustments. There was a separate drawer in the desk, locked, but the key was in the pencil cup, like he'd left it there for me. Inside, cassette tapes, labeled neatly. June 4th, 1985. Subject reacts to denied travel request. I stared at the old tape recorder on the shelf. My fingers twitched toward it, then recoiled. Not yet. I wasn't ready to hear my own voice, manipulated and cataloged. Instead, I pulled out one of the red folders. It was thin, too thin. Rosemary, 1973. I had to sit down. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Typed. Subject exhibits symptoms of postpartum melancholy. Denies severity. Recommends gentle reinforcement of dependency narratives. There it was. The year our son was born. The year I stopped painting. The year I started calling myself just a mom, like it was a role I had to apologize for. I didn't stop painting because of the baby. I stopped because he told me I needed rest, that I was overwhelmed, that I should step back and let the world slow down. He told me I wasn't coping well, and I had believed him. But it wasn't rest. It was restriction. And it had begun long before I ever suspected. Suddenly, I remembered the yellow pills, the ones he called vitamins. I had taken them dutifully every morning for 3 years, and then they just disappeared. He told me the pharmacy had discontinued them. I never questioned it. But in the files, I found a note. Discontinued yellow capsule protocol. Side effects too visible. Switch to tasteless drops added to subject's tea. I froze. My tea. For 3 years, I'd felt floaty in the mornings. I thought it was menopause. I thought it was age. But now I saw it for what it was. Sedation. Precise. Controlled. Administered with gentle hands and quiet lies. I stood up too fast. My knees buckled. I wasn't mourning my husband anymore. I was grieving a version of myself that had been stolen. Outside, the wind picked up, shaking the trees like a warning. And still, I kept reading. Because I had to know how far the roots of his manipulation reached. Because once you open a door like that, you don't get to walk away. Because part of me, the part that had once been an artist, a wife, a woman, was coming back to life. And she was furious. I didn't touch the tapes until the 3rd day. I'd read almost 24 binders by then. I'd taken notes, pages of them, as if studying for an exam on my own life. But there was only so much I could glean from typed records, from his polished clinical assessments of my moods, my words, my sleep. What I needed now was his voice, or maybe mine. Or maybe the cassette tapes were brittle with age, but well preserved. Labeled in his tidy handwriting, October 9th, 1983. Subject resists directive. Another read, December 25th, 1991. Subject overreacts to gift absence. And then this one, in black marker, June 14th, 1976. Kitchen incident. I sat at his desk, pressed the plastic buttons on the old machine, and held my breath. A hiss. Then, Rose, you're being unreasonable. No one said you couldn't visit your sister. I only said it wasn't the best time. My voice, small, raw. That's not what you said. You said Helen fills my head with nonsense. You said she undermines you. I said she causes you distress. It's not healthy, sweetheart. And you're proving my point by getting upset like this. This is why I keep notes. And just like that, I was back in that kitchen. I could see it. The faded linoleum, the chipped mug I loved, The way my hands had trembled while washing dishes, and he stood there, arms folded, so calm. I fast forwarded. The next words caught me off guard. June 14th. Patient exhibited heightened emotional dysregulation. Risk of escalation noted. Implemented sedative protocol. 20 milligrams via T at 1840 hours. Patient. I hit stop. My hand hovered over the machine, the rage in my throat so sharp it tasted like metal. I wasn't his wife. I was his subject, his patient, his private experiment dressed up in pearls and polite silence. What I had called marriage, he had documented like a long, winding case study. I opened a lower drawer in the desk. Inside were envelopes, dozens of them, all addressed, all stamped, none mailed. One had my sister Helen's name. I pulled it out, slid it open with my thumbnail, and read. My handwriting, my words. A letter I had written in 1998. I remembered sitting in the garden, writing it in anger after a fight, telling Helen I was thinking of leaving him. He never sent it. Instead, he'd tucked it here and scribbled across the top in red ink. Risk of external influence. Letter intercepted. That was the year Helen stopped calling. I thought she'd grown tired of me. Thought maybe I'd done something wrong. I told myself it was distance, life, distractions. But it wasn't. He'd cut her out like a surgeon removing a tumor. I sat back in his leather chair, the one molded to his spine. I could feel the shape of him in it. The way he'd sat every night behind this desk, recording, logging, labeling, for decades. While I folded laundry, made dinners, stared out windows, and wondered what I'd done to lose myself. He didn't just gaslight me, he erased me, bit by bit. And then something occurred to me. A thought that chilled me to the bone. What if this wasn't just about me? I rifled through the back of the drawer, found a file marked EG2. Inside, photographs of my sister, my friend Maggie, my daughter-in-law, notes, dates, unapproved contact, interference observed, risk of alliance, encourages independent thought. He had files on every woman who got too close to me. He documented every time I smiled too much after a visit. Every time I came home looking reinvigorated. He tracked and punished joy, and I'd let him. I thought of the times I felt inexplicably tired after coffee with Maggie, the way he'd always offered to make the tea. Just rest, Rose. I'll bring it to you. Had he drugged me then too? Was any part of my life real? I didn't know anymore, but I knew this. I wasn't going to be his final note. I wasn't going to be the forgotten footnote in his meticulous study. I reached for a fresh folder and labeled it myself. Rose. Truth begins here. The war wasn't over. It hadn't even begun. But I was waking up, and I had every intention of writing the ending myself. The knock on the door came just after dawn. I hadn't slept again, not properly. I'd spent the entire night cross-legged on the floor of his office, surrounded by files and tapes and decades of stolen life. I was still in my robe, my hair unbrushed, my cheeks flushed with the heat of unspoken fury. When I opened the door, I expected a neighbor. Instead, it was his brother, Charles, in a black wool coat and a stiff expression that hadn't changed in 40 years. Rose, he said, as if tasting the name. I heard the will has been opened. I nodded. You must have had your ear pressed to the grave. He didn't smile. He pushed past me, uninvited, as he always had, and looked around the hallway like it belonged to him. His eyes landed on the office door, still ajar. He noticed the open drawers, the scattered files. You've been reading, he said. I didn't respond. He sighed, set his gloves on the entryway table, and turned to face me fully. Listen, Rosie, I know this is overwhelming, but Edward was a complex man. He had his ways. Brilliant, yes, a little particular perhaps, but he meant well. Is that what you told yourself? I asked. All these years? Charles hesitated. He talked to me, about your situation, your nerves. He didn't want to burden you. That's why he asked me to be executor. Executor? I laughed, a bitter, breathless sound. Executor of what, Charles? The estate or my autonomy? His eyes narrowed. Let's not make this emotional. Oh, darling, I said, stepping closer, fire flickering in my belly. I'm not being emotional. I'm being precise, just like him. Only difference is I still have a soul. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I walked to the office, pulled the thickest binder off the shelf, the one labeled Behavioral Adjustment Reports, 1994 to 2007, and thrust it toward him. Read it, I said. He didn't take it. This isn't helping anyone. It's helping me, I said, sharper now, for the first time in my life. His mouth tightened. Look, he said, trying a different tone, gentler, patronizing. There's still time to handle this discreetly. The trust allows for a guardianship clause if there's evidence of, you finish that sentence, I warned, and I'll drag every one of these files into court myself. He paled. I've already seen the legal paperwork, I continued. The clause you and he drafted. The plan to have me declared unfit, quietly, elegantly, efficiently. So you could manage the estate while I was medicated into oblivion. Charles shook his head. You're twisting things. No, I said. I'm untwisting them, and I've barely begun. He moved toward the door, suddenly agitated. You don't understand what he was trying to do. I understand perfectly, I said, voice low. He built a prison and called it love. Charles froze at the threshold. I didn't wait for him to speak. I stepped forward, placed my hand on the edge of the door, and said calmly, You should go now. His eyes were flinty. This won't end the way you think. I smiled. Oh, I hope not. Because the way I thought it would end was me losing my name to a file folder. He left. He didn't slam the door, that wasn't his style. But the silence he left behind was thick and somehow satisfying. I stood in the hallway, breathing hard, the heat rising up my neck. He knew what his brother had done, and he was going to finish the job if I let him. But I wouldn't. I wasn't the confused little wife anymore. I was a woman with evidence, with memory, with rage, and above all, with clarity. Later that afternoon, I made my first call to an attorney. I told him everything. I didn't sugarcoat a word, and when he asked if I had proof, I laughed. Darling, I said, I have footnotes. We scheduled a meeting. Then I called the locksmith again, not to change the office lock, but to change every lock in the house, because from now on, the only doors closed in this house would be the ones I chose to close. It rained the morning of the hearing. Not a dramatic, cinematic storm, just a soft, steady drizzle. Like the sky itself was exhaling after holding its breath too long. I wore gray. Not black, not navy, but slate gray wool that felt solid, grounded. I pinned up my hair and tucked a yellow file into my purse, the one marked G1. Subject reclaimed. At the courthouse, my attorney, a woman named Judith Bell, sharp as a scalpel, met me with a single nod and a cup of strong coffee. Are you ready? She asked. I've been ready since 1976, I said. Inside, the courtroom was too bright, too white, the kind of sterile environment where truth is supposed to win but often gets smothered under procedure. Charles was already there, his tie crooked, his hands folded on the table like he was praying. He didn't look at me. That was fine. I didn't come for him. I came for me. Judith stood. She didn't speak with fire. She spoke with evidence. Pages, exhibits, handwritten notes in Edward's script. Subject denied request to visit sister. Increased control measures recommended. Photos, me through the kitchen window labeled low affect. Observe for depressive episode. Audio transcripts, medication logs. Letters never sent. She painted a portrait not of a woman losing her mind, but of a woman gaslit into silence. Charles's lawyer tried to interrupt, said it was grief, overreaction, that Edward had only been concerned about my well-being. Judith handed the judge a document. Declaration of incapacity, right? She said, filed and notarized without consent, prepared 6 months before his death. This wasn't concern, this was strategy. Then softly she added, he didn't leave her a farewell, he left her a leash. The judge, an older woman with silver hair and kind-lined eyes, looked at me. Mrs. Grace, she said, would you like to speak? I rose. My knees ached. My voice wobbled at first, but I met the judge's gaze. I was married to a man for 52 years, a man everyone called respectable, and every night he locked his office. He told me I was forgetful, that I was sensitive, that the world was too much for me. I took a breath, and I believed him. The courtroom was silent. But belief, I continued, isn't proof. And I have proof. I brought it with me. Every page, every lie, and all I want, all I've ever wanted, and gives my name back. I sat down. The judge didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she nodded. When the gavel came down, it was quiet. Just a soft thunk against polished wood. But it sounded like thunder. The trust was dissolved. The guardianship clause, nullified. The estate, the assets, the house, mine again. But more importantly, I was mine again. Charles stood, gathered his papers, and left the courtroom without a word. I didn't watch him go. I turned to Judith. Thank you, I said. She shook her head. You did this. All I did was hold the flashlight. Outside, the rain had stopped. The world smelled new, sharp and green. I walked home. Not to a house managed by someone else, but to my home. I didn't throw everything away. That's what people think healing looks like. A bonfire, a purging. But real healing, it's slower, softer. I started by opening the curtains in his office. I let the light in, then I painted the walls. Yellow. Not a bold yellow, a soft one like the center of a daffodil. I turned it into a sewing room. I moved my easel in. And one morning, I sat in the leather chair, the one that had shaped to his body. And I picked up my brush, not to paint something perfect, but to paint something mine. I woke early the next morning before the sun had fully risen. The light outside was pink and sleepy, bleeding into the edges of the sky like watercolor on wet paper. I wrapped myself in my favorite cardigan, the soft blue one he always said was too slouchy, and padded barefoot down the hall. I passed the office. No, not the office, not anymore. The sewing room. My room. The door was open. I'd left it that way on purpose. I made tea, real tea, no pills, no drops, no bitter aftertaste, and sat in the kitchen with the window cracked open. The air smelled of damp earth and blooming things. There was a bird on the fence, singing like it didn't care who heard it. For the first time in a long time, I felt still. Not hollow, not haunted, just still. I spent the day cleaning, not because I had to, but because I wanted to touch my own space again. I dusted the bookshelves, washed the baseboards. I found old photos in a box under the guest bed. Me, 25, standing in front of an easel, sun in my hair, I looked so alive, so unapologetic. I taped the photo to the inside of the closet in my sewing room. A reminder. I used to know who I was. Now I was remembering. That afternoon, Margaret came by. She'd brought 2 bottles of wine, 3 kinds of cheese, and a look on her face like she was expecting to find me in pieces. She didn't. We sat on the floor, barefoot, sipping warm wine out of teacups, laughing so hard at one point we both nearly choked. I missed you, she said softly, around a mouthful of brie. I missed me too, I replied. That night, after she left, I stood in front of the hallway mirror, the same mirror that had watched me shrink for decades. And for the first time, I saw a woman who took up space, silver hair wild, eyes clear, back straight. I touched the glass. You're here, I whispered. You made it. The next week, I hosted something small at the library, a quiet gathering. I called it Unfolding. 12 women showed up, some with notebooks, some with nothing but the ache of being ignored. We talked. We told the truth. We said the hard things out loud. One woman cried when she admitted she didn't know what her favorite food was anymore, that her husband always ordered for her. Another whispered that she hadn't laughed, really laughed, in 5 years. And when they asked me what I'd done, how I had found the strength to open the door, I told them the truth. I was never weak, I said. I was just outnumbered. Afterward, one of the younger women lingered. Her name was Claire. She was maybe 30. eyes like storm clouds. She waited until the others left, then stepped closer. I think I'm living your life, she said, but the early version. I didn't blink. I didn't ask what she meant. I just reached into my bag and handed her one of the small flyers I'd made. On it, in soft script, was the phrase I'd typed over and over until it felt like my own. You are not a subject. You are not a case file. You are not a prisoner. You are a woman. And the door is already unlocked. That night, as I sat by the window, the stars came out one by one. I held my tea, still hot, still pure, mine, and listened to the quiet. But this time, it wasn't the silence of being watched. It was the silence of peace. I don't hate him. Not anymore. That would be too easy. Hate is just another kind of chain. He tried to define me and to document me out of existence. But I lived. I am living. And that's the final entry he'll never write. Because the pen is in my hand now.